Okay, so we should probably do this, huh? We should get this crystal pack done for the overexplained because it shouldn't take too long. I actually have a few builds for crystal that I like to run. I think crystal is a very good pack, and I honestly think it's one of the more potent packs in terms of its explosive end game in the towards the 10th trophy of a run in comparison to some of the other packs when it's actually going. So we're gonna do our usual value-oriented setup where we're not being pushed into any single direction. We're just kind of got good value from the items. E.g., we have like our tempo here, which can help us build up into the epics faster. We've got lucky here, which again, the lucky rolls is just simply there for getting the whole lucky rolls where it's just like contains only items you own or tailored builds, etc. because it helps me try and find these crystal items. And then we've got gathering, which gives us a couple of rerolls for free, which again will help me find some more crystal items. And then we've got treasure, which on level 5 is just going to give us an epic chest, which either we're going to sell the item for the 23-ish gold on average that it's worth, or we end up using it because it might be something like, say, a topaz spear or a amber or a conjure spear, etc. Otherwise, I would run my usual stuff of like turtle, scorch, shock, or like any of these other like highly aggressive early game stuff. Anyway, let's get in and see if we can get a crystal run going, shall we? So we got gathering. Again, this is fine. So in the early game as crystal, because of the way crystal works, it's applying bleed. I highly value anything that can like multi-hit, and regular bow being a 15 cost, so it can pair off for epics on day 3 and day 4 quite easily, whilst also having multicast is very good for when we start finding crystal-based items. So I'm also going to pick up the bra shield just for some economy-based stuff as well. So we should win here because we are shielding against the shock damage. Actually, we are going to lose. Forgot Book plays 2 shock, and we're only blocking one of those whilst he's doing 20 and is full blocking us, so we're just gonna let Bra Shield do the Bra Shield thing, generate some gold, and then we'll just go into the next round. But yeah, early game we're hoping to find some stuff like, say, an Amethyst Bow. We can pick up some more cheapy items here. Something like an Amethyst Bow is really good for bleed. It can point you in several directions. Finding ruby knives early is okay, but really it's all about that amethyst bow or topaz spear. Like finding one of those 2 items is kind of like your bleed moment. Like those are the best bleed items in my opinion for applying lots of bleed fast. Priest, healing touch, and we're going to level twice, and we'll just go next. Yeah, applying lots of bleed very, very fast. So this is the topaz spear, for example. It just applies 10 bleed every like 4.6-ish seconds on its base version, which is quite a lot of bleed that ramps up over time, and as you're hitting, like, you're just taking a lot of damage as I am here, but the real beauty of Topaz Spear is when you get it to 2-star, it applies 20 at the start of combat whilst also applying 40 per hit, so 60 bleed within its first trigger, and you can do some shenanigans with that. Okay, so we got Gathering. We're probably going to take Traveler here just to get the Traveler stock so we can roll now that we're level 3 and finding epics. We got Ruby Knife here. It's okay. I'd much rather try and find better bleed items at this point, like a Topaz Spear. Now hopefully we can find us a Conjure Spear. We did find an Amber as well, so I'm going to sell out the Bra Shield, pick up this Amber, and we can pair off these swords. And hopefully find a Conjure Spear. We did not find Conjure, but we did find a Time Pendant. So we're going to Time Pendant above the Topaz Spear, and now people are probably thinking, like, just do it above the Amber, you'll trigger this more frequently. I prefer to do it above Topaz Spear because then you're speeding up the natural trigger, plus also getting the extra trigger of this. And if we can find a Conjure Spear, I'll be happy. Because I want to kind of show off the Conjure Spear version. Okay, there's Conjure Spear. Freeze. Because I feel like this Conjure Spear version is not that common that you see people run. A lot of people tend to just run, like, Launcher, Dragon's Call, Amethyst Bow with Shardfang and just like full nuke boards and generate money and stuff in that way. Whereas this one is also pretty consistent at get going and also very, very strong. So the entire idea of this version is you're playing around just these 2 items. You're playing around Amber and you're playing around Topaz Spear. The Conjure Spear just gets you there faster because it helps you get your 2-star Topaz Spears faster, whilst also naturally just giving you chests, which means you have chances of finding more Ambers, you have chances of finding your Nature's Calls, some Tree Catchers, etc., and you just get strong that way. So we open our chest first, just in case. We got enough Time Pendant, that's fine. We're gonna either take the Discover Epic or we steal from Granny. I'm going to steal from Granny in case it has something like a Phantom Brew, so we can multicast the spear. It did not, but we do have a Mirror Elixir, which is very good for us, because now we can use Mirror Elixir to help upgrade our Amber when we find it. We can just aggressively level now, because of the fact we do have this Conjure Spear going. So, we're just going to do that. I should have shifted everything down and put an extra time pendant above this time pendant. But it's fine. Like, as you can see, like, we ramp up so much bleed. Having, like, one item here, just a multi-hit into this bleed would have been nice. But it is not necessary. There we go, we got a 2-star, we can sell this. We don't see enough amber, so we get out of that. It's level twice. Yeah, what we should have done was this. And this might look redundant because obviously these are triggering at the same time. But this will give you an extra trigger of this every now and then. Like, this will reduce the cooldown of this, and they'll get out of sync, and then this will just, like, cause this to go more frequently. And hopefully I can showcase that here without being blown up by a launcher build. Cool. Vitality. So, we need multicasts, and we need amber. There's the amber. So if you watch this cooldown, maybe I was wrong. I swear I've noticed this before. Get out of sync and like, maybe you need like a slight cooldown on this top one. Ah, it's fine. It's whatever. Okay, so we just got to upgrade the amber. Getting this for 3-star doesn't matter all that much. And then look for one more amber. There's the amber. Freeze. We're going to do this just so we can pick up next round. I guess we move this up like this now. And yeah, eventually by the end of this run, you'll see this bleed number getting to some pretty high numbers for a 10-win build. It'll be within the thousands quite easily. Did I not freeze that amber? Whoops. Oh, well, never punished. Now we're looking for multicast items, so we're looking for like Nature's Call, we're looking for Lost Fragments. Brew is also very good. Nature's Call and Lost Fragments preferably. That's a big mace. But 1,000 bleed without even having our multicast items yet. Paying 40 for a 35 doesn't really interest me all that much, but I'll hold it for now. Both of what we want are here, and then that's also here, so we can freeze, and we'll use the Mirror Elixir on the Lost Fragment to get the extra Lost Fragment that we want for this build. So we do this. And then hopefully... Okay, we don't want enough Lost Fragment that way. We want this, though, and we want to put that here. And... boom, this is basically the full build. You want to star up the Nature's Call a little bit, but really you don't want to pair these, because then you'll have to find enough Lost Fragment to put here, and it's an expensive pairing. Time Pendant, you can turn into another Nature's Call if you want. I prefer to have it as Time Pendant, because it just gets the combo going a little bit faster. So you're not, there's less chance that you just get blown up like this. But, yeah, you ramp up a lot of bleed, and you just go kind of crazy with it. Cool. So, let's go over the collection, and let's talk a little bit about Crystal, shall we? Now, in my opinion, there is not a single Crystal item that is quote-unquote bad in the game. These all have their own place, they all are very strong at different points in the run, and I think for that reason it's one of the most well-rounded packs. Is it as good as Arcane in terms of explosive possibilities? Arcane, of course, is stronger when you have a full board and full late game build because of like the way that these two items interact, but Crystal still has some pretty explosive potential for like your end board, and it's quite consistent at get going. So Ruby Knife, in its base form, it's just a slow way of applying bleed. It's okay. It's 2 bleed. It's whatever. It does 5 damage. It's fine. It is considered a dagger, so it is pretty nice with Midas Diary, considering the fact that also you have Shardfang that's also a dagger. It triggers whenever you apply bleed. So these two obviously work very well together at generating money for Midas Diary. There are better ways of doing it, but that is one way of doing it. Plus the fact that these are both considered daggers, it also means Tome of Blades is a nice consideration in that sort of lineup. You are then applying bleed. Tome of Blades gets multicast when you have multiple daggers, so you're also doing that bleed damage multiple times. Like, it's a fine item. You get it to 1 star, it just doubles the values. You get it to 2 star, and now on the first trigger, it's giving itself permanent bleed increase. This is when it starts getting good. You want to get this to 2 star as early as possible. I want to say if this isn't 2 star by day 6, you probably want to start thinking of other options. So like if this is 1 star on day 5 and you get to the day 6 encounter with the enchanter, which lets you upgrade a rare or lower item for free, then you can like upgrade your Ruby Knife to being 2 star. If it's not 2 star by the end of day 6, I generally believe you might want to consider like pivoting into one of the stronger bleed items into your late game build, because this will fall off. But permanent bleed ramping is pretty good. Unfortunately, it's only on the first trigger, so you can't really get this to go all that crazy because you're limited to +3 bleed per day. But if you get that early on into the run, obviously +3 bleed per day is going to amount to something quite significant. And then when you get it to 3 star, it's just +6 bleed per day. I generally believe because it's a 3 star item, it should lose on first trigger and it should just be on trigger, but it might be too strong then. Even if you change it from +6 to like back down to +3, like it just basically make it the same as the 2 star, just remove the first part. But I think Ruby Knife is probably the one item in this pack where I'm just kind of like, if you don't get it going early, kind of drop it and replace it with something better later. But it is a pretty good item. But again, you compare this with like Amber, for example, give like kind of what we just did with the Topaz Spear. You could do that with a Ruby Knife, and it goes kind of crazy. Snowflakes. This is a Frosty and a Crystal item, so it does come with crit. It applies 1 bleed. It's very quick. It'll ramp up quite nicely, and as you're starring it up, it does just double those values. But as you get to 2 star, it starts reducing its own cooldown, and then at 3 star, it reduces its own cooldown and applies bleed twice. So this item's fine. Again, you're gonna probably rotate out of this in favor for some of the better bleed items later into the run, but an early game Snowflakes with some other stuff is like pretty good. So like Snowflakes plus Cold Shot, for example, you're triggering that bleed quite frequently. Snowflakes plus Crescent Shot, or Snowflakes plus regular bow, even plus Trident somewhere here. This is fine because it does hit frequently, so it is going to trigger that bleed damage quite frequently. 2.4 seconds is pretty quick for the early game. Now, Amethyst Bow is probably like the best bleed item because it's 1, a very strong engine for Shardfang, but 2, it has multi-hit on itself, so it's already doing a lot of bleed damage. It's just a little slow, but becomes a great target for stuff like Amber. Now, on its base version, it's applying 1 bleed with 1 extra multicast, so this is triggering twice every cooldown cycle. It's going to give 2 bleed every cooldown cycle, whilst also doing 2 instances of bleed damage every cooldown cycle at its base form, because again, +1 multicast. When you get it to 1 star, it gains an extra multicast and an extra bleed, whilst doing 16 damage instead of 8, so it's just doubling those values. But now you're doing 3 instances of bleed damage and applying 4 bleed on every cooldown cycle. And then you go to 2 star. This is when it gets really crazy and becomes probably the best bleed item in the game, because it's applying 4 bleed every trigger, has 4 multicast, so it's doing 5 casts per cooldown cycle, and on trigger has a 10% chance to apply 12 additional bleed. This thing, once it's permacasting via either an Amber combo or a Dragon's Call launcher combo, is going to ramp up so much bleed, do so many instances of bleed damage, that in itself it can be its own build identity. It's a very strong bow, shouldn't be slept on. Since it's triggering so frequently as well, makes it a great receptacle for Shardfang to get this going crazy, which then, of course, if you put in a Midas Diary, you're generating a bunch of money. Like, Amethyst Bow is very strong. If you're trying to go into towards crystals or even like bow builds or anything that can multi-hit, picking these up early, like day 1 for free, it's completely fine. Getting this 1 star before day 6 is amazing, because then obviously if you get this 2 star with the enchanter encounter, it's crazy. But really, this thing you could even like just pick it up late into the run and 2 star it, because it doesn't need to ramp up. It's just always good when it shows like this. You can give it extra multicast with stuff like Modern Archery, but in my opinion, Modern Archery is just too slow. You're sacrificing a lot of early tempo to try and get this going. One additional multicast is also not that big of a deal when you have stuff like Amber, um, Launcher, and Dragon's Call that could just like cause it to go infinite without the need of Modern Archery. So, in my opinion, Modern Archery is just kind of bait and a little bit bad, and it was just a waste of gold and early game tempo. But having Amethyst Bow as kind of your centerpiece for every bleed build does make this really, really good. Poison Dagger, this is more just a poison item. It's got the crystal tag, which does mean when it comes to Emerald Sword, you can give it the bonus bleed through Emerald Sword, and then it does become pretty good for its thing. It's a decently fast dagger, ramps up quite a bit of poison because it has the Elven tag. You get it to 1 star, it just doubles those values. You get it to 2 star, now it doubles those values again, but also applies debuffs twice. This is where the Emerald Sword combo comes into play, because you're going to give it bonus bleed from the Emerald Sword, and then the 2 star is going to apply that bleed twice to the enemy tower. So it is pretty good for that sense. You give this multicast through, like, say, an Elvish Orb or something, or through, like, your Nature's Call and your Lost Fragment. This thing is going to ramp up a lot of debuff damage as well. At 3 star, it just applies those debuff 4 times. This dagger is more of an Elven thing than it is a bleed thing, but since it has many avenues of giving it multicast through, say, Elvish Orb or Lost Fragment and Nature's Call, it does make it a pretty good receptacle for Midas Diary money generation, plus then you can give it bleed for Emerald Sword, or any potions and stuff can give it, like, extra debuff value as well. So this thing can kind of go crazy. It's just, there's better options if you're looking for something to apply bleed. Diamond Axe, similar to my reasoning with Poison Dagger, this thing can go crazy. There's just better options for applying bleed. But since this gains bonus bleed and bonus shock for every 10 triggers of the item below it, it applies 1 bleed. So after 10 triggers, it will apply 3 bleed. Then after 10 more triggers, it will apply 5 bleed, etc., etc. It does mean once you have your engine going of Amethyst Bow and Shardfang, putting your Shardfang below your Diamond Axe means this thing is going to ramp up a lot of bleed. Now, at that point, it kind of becomes a win more, and it becomes redundant. In my opinion, this is only really an early game item. Like, you get one of these, you put on your board, and then you, like, put some, like, multicast underneath it. It goes kind of crazy, and then you're just going to pivot out of it for, like, the stronger bleed options. The problem with it is the fact, 1, it's only bonus bleed. You have to get it to 3 star before it becomes permanent. And 2, there's just better items to do the job of applying bleed and applying shock in the game, so it falls out of favor. But again, the early game potency of having, like, a Crescent Shot that has 3 multicast, so it's triggering 4 times underneath Diamond Axe is obviously pretty potent for the mid game. But I'd still much rather just run an Amethyst Bow. Amber, this is an engine piece. If this is the first Overexplained that you're seeing of mine, engine pieces are items like Amber, Arcane Orb, Elvish Orb, Fire Orb, Frozen Orb, Holy Sigil, and yeah, that's kind of it, like Dark Orb as well. These are things that don't really do anything by themselves. They have no place on your board if they're just by themselves, but they are an engine to getting other items going better. So, for example, Arcane Orb being your Soul Splitter. Soul Splitter needs debuffs. This becomes the engine of your Arcane of your Soul Splitter. Amber triggering the Crystal Item to the left. This becomes the engine for your Topaz Spear to make your Topaz Spear go crazy. Amber causing Amethyst Bow to trigger, again, becomes the engine for your Amethyst Bow, etc. So by itself, it's not that great, but as you saw in that run, there is some pretty nasty combos you could do with it, like pairing it with the Topaz Spear or pairing it with your Amethyst Bow to get these things triggering like crazy to apply lots and lots and lots of bleed, which then in turn allows you to have Shardfang on the board and have that thing trigger like crazy, because this thing is going to be triggering the actual item that applies the bleed, with not the Shardfang. You want it to trigger bleed applying items, and then this thing is going to go crazy and cause that bleed damage to go absolutely bananas. As you star it up, it just increases the amount of times it triggers the item, so it goes from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3, and then from 3 to 4, plus giving permanent bleed to the item at 3 star. 3 starring an Amber, you were not going to really 3 star this before you say 3 star the Amethyst Bow. But once you do 3 star this in, like, say, an Endless board, which you probably wouldn't, it does start giving permanent ramping bleed. Topaz Spear, as you saw in that run, I love this item. In my opinion, it's one of the more fun Crystal Bleed builds that you can do. It's just a lot of bleed. Like, it just applies a lot of bleed. It's 15 damage and 10 bleed at a 4.6-second cooldown. It's very slow, but there are ways to speed it up, like you saw in that run, how I was using the Amber with a time pendant above the Amber to cause this to activate sooner. Like, there is ways of making this better. It does just apply a lot of bleed. You get it to 1-star, it applies even more bleed. Then at 2-star, it can start a combat bleed plus even more bleed. And then at 3-star, it's the same thing, just more of those values. 3-starring is a little bit redundant. If it did a little bit more, then that would be cool. Like, if it gained the effect that the Trident has over here, where it's like trigger bleed damage twice on hit, I feel like that would be pretty good at 3-star. But outside of freestyle, there's kind of no point of making this a freestyle ahead of other items. Shard Fang. This item is crazy. So if you have a way of applying bleed a lot and applying it fast via, say, your Amethyst Bow or a Topaz Spear combo with Amber, this thing is going to trigger every single time you apply bleed and then cause that bleed damage. That's where the value of Shard Fang comes from. It also has a 2.0 attack speed, so it's going to also just naturally trigger pretty fast. Then as you're leveling it up, it gains even more triggers every time you apply bleed. So one bleed trigger application will then become 2 triggers of this item, which makes it the perfect dagger for Midas Diary. It's going to give you a lot of gold, like within like a short burst of like 15 seconds with an Amethyst Bow and Shard Fang combo going, you could easily get like 50 plus gold. So Bleed build plus Midas Diary does become one of the best gold generating builds in the game for just getting 10 wins, and you can carry that tempo forward and it becomes pretty crazy. And then as you get it to 2-star, it applies, it triggers 3 times, but it can now also gain bleed. If you notice when it's at 1-star, it says this cannot gain bleed, but at 2-star, this doesn't have that text anymore, which allows it to start gaining bleed. This makes it a perfect pairing as well with Emerald Sword. And then at 3-star, it applies extra bleed every time you apply bleed to the tower, and it triggers 4 times. So I will have to caveat this because there was a little bit of confusion in a stream that I was in at one point. Once this gets 2-star and is able to gain bleed from effects like Emerald Sword, this does not mean a Shard Fang with bleed will trigger another Shard Fang. There is no infinite looping like that in the game. The items have to have a unique name for them to be affected by the tooltip of like when another item applies bleed, etc. Like, so a Shard Fang cannot be applying bleed for it to trigger Shard Fang. It has to be another item like, say, Amethyst Bow or Topaz Spear or any other item that has bleed that isn't called Shard Fang. Emerald Sword, I view this more as an engine item. It's just a steady way of gaining fast bleed. Like, it's 2.3 second cooldown for 4 bleed because it's going to give itself the bonus bleed. Again, there's just better receptacles for applying bleed. Giving bonus bleed to an item as well, it's not that potent in this state of the game, because why give it +1 bleed when you just give it, say, a Nature's Call or something else that makes it trigger again to apply even more bleed instead of having an Emerald Sword. So unfortunately, Emerald Sword just doesn't have that much staying power. At 2-star, it does start giving 4 bleed to every item. So again, the only real reason I would actually use an Emerald Sword is to pair with a Poison Dagger because of the applying debuffs twice part. But at 3-star, it does give permanent bleed, which is kind of nice, I guess. But yeah, generally, I don't like Emerald Sword anymore. It needs some love. It needs a buff. I don't know what exactly it could do without breaking it and making it an insane legendary. Maybe just increase the amount of bonus bleed it's giving, because right now 1 bonus bleed really isn't that much. But overall, I think if this was like 2 and then 4 and then 6, it would actually be kind of like a crazy thing for crystal builds, and wouldn't be an auto win because you still need to like actually get the build online, right, for it to be pretty good. But overall, I think Emerald Sword's probably the weaker part of the package. It's still pretty strong. Like, if you find this early, like, it still applies bleed pretty quick, so it does pair nicely with like multicast items. It's just in your final boards, you're probably not going to have an Emerald Sword. Now, in terms of build pathing and the way that I would approach Crystal throughout a run, I would look for either early game Ruby Knives. If my first 2 shops had some like Ruby Knives and stuff like that, and I knew I was going to go towards like a Crystal route, I would pick up a couple of Ruby Knives. Try and pair that with some multicast via like a regular bow or crescent shot and stuff, and just pin it down some health bars or some snowflakes, get some snowflakes going, and then do the same thing of like pairing that with like multicast. Eventually I'm gonna pivot out of snowflakes. But if I was with Ruby Knives and I did get it 2-star, like I got it to 1-star on day 5 and then I got the Enchanter event and it allowed me to make it to 2-star, I could then focus more on building around the Ruby Knife itself, giving it multicasts and giving it an Amber. If I didn't get it 2-star, then I'm going to look to pivot out of Ruby Knife at this point and start looking for stuff like Amethyst Bows, or if I found Amethyst Bows early, I would just build around the Amethyst Bow itself. And pretty much then from that point, I would be looking for things like, say, Dragon's Call and Launcher to make the Amethyst Bow trigger more, try to get the Amethyst Bow to 2-star as fast as possible, while steadily leveling to level 7 by day 8, preferably. And then from there, I would be pairing that with a Shard Fang to get that triggering that bleed damage from the Amethyst Bow more frequently, and throwing in a Midas Diary if I found one, just so we have some money so we can keep steadily leveling and finding the items that we want to pair everything off. At that point as well, I would probably be looking for stuff like Time Pendants to get my Dragon's Call to launch sooner, to be able to force this combo to happen faster. And from there, that's pretty much the end board. I'm then looking to like just 2-star everything. If we didn't go the Amethyst route, I would definitely be looking for what I did in that run, where it would be finding the Topaz Spear as early as possible with a Conjure Spear. So that way we could print the Topaz Spears to get it to 2-star as fast as possible. Then we're going to be looking for the Amber alongside doing that, whilst leveling up to level 7. This will allow us to create the combo that we had in this run in the video, where we just cause the Topaz Spear to trigger more frequently. We then want to give Lost Fragment to both the Amber and the Topaz Spear, as well as a Nature's Call to the Topaz Spear, and a Time Pendant to the Amber. Eventually we're going to sell out of this and we'll put Time Pendant and these multicast combos in. So Time Pendant on Amber, this is a 2-second cooldown and removes 1 second from the item below. If you get this to 1-star, it removes 2 seconds from the item below. So every 2 seconds, it will remove 2 seconds from the Amber. Amber is a 3.7-second cooldown, so you're basically getting this thing to trigger as early as 2 seconds within the run, within the combat start, unless you find a way of reducing the cooldown Time Pendant at the same time, which allows the Amber just go absolutely crazy with the Topaz Spear and cause the infinite looping combo that you saw of this thing, just applying lots of bleeding, melting health bars with all the multicast it gets. In this combo though, since we're using all 6 slots to just create these 2 items doing the main damage of Lost Fragment and Nature's Call, there is no place for a Shard Fang, unless you manage to, say, find a Dreamcatcher extremely early and you reduce the cooldown of the Amber to 1 second, then you can just drop the Time Pendant and throw in a Shard Fang. But overall, that's kind of like the way I would prefer to run it, is just having these 2 items, the multicasts and the Time Pendant. And then the other options are just if you find things like, say, an early Emerald Sword, you can pair that with, like, say, a Poison Dagger, or you can find Emerald Sword plus any of these other bleed items and the Shard Fang early and, like, just cause a bleed build that way. You also have, quote-unquote, the Bow Slop, where you just kind of, like, 2-star an Amethyst Bow as fast as possible. You give it Launcher plus Dragon's Call, so that way you can cause it to trigger, like, a flurry of shots the moment the Dragon's Call goes off. You then just throw in stuff like, say, Regular Bow and Warrior's Bow, and just have it just vomit out projectiles at the enemy tower, causing this bleed damage to go absolutely insane. Overall, that one's probably like the most easy to get going because it's really just finding these 2 items. But in terms of enjoyment, I do think the Topaz Spear and Amber is one of the better builds, and then the whole like Amethyst Bow, Shard Fang plus Amber and Midas Diary is like really, really money efficient. But yeah, that's it for the Crystal Overexplained. I hope it was insightful, hope it helps, and I hope it made sense. I will catch you guys in the next one.